warm welcome to TV Africa News and hope you had a wonderful day. This is Africa Today. My name is Najima Luima, but first are the headlines. Minister Tumwebaze breaks ground for construction of Agriculture Mechanization Center in Elgon region. Uganda Investment Authority gives 5 acres of land and 10-year tax holiday to Professor Ogwang for Covidex factory. Black American chefs want credit for legacy of innovation. A warm welcome once again. Now the news in detail. The Minister of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, Frank Tumwebaze, on Tuesday officiated the groundbreaking ceremony for the construction of Bangoko Agriculture Mechanization Center, which will serve farmers in Elgon region. According to the minister, the center will contain a workshop for mechanization equipment like tractors, bulldozers, drillers, generators, oil, hydraulics, a training facility, and an assembly yard. We have more on this story. While commissioning the project, Minister Tumwebaze promised to launch a move to reclaim back the stolen government land, mainly that which belongs to the Ministry of Agriculture. In 2020, the government announced plans to erect agricultural mechanization centers across the country, and Tumwebaze says they are looking at least 18 zones of Uganda. 3 are already operational, 2 zonal centers in Dokolo and in PG districts, and the national one in Wakiso. Agriculture, a sector which employs about 72% of the total labor force, is one of the 5 strategic sectors that was identified by the National Development Plan to help transform Uganda's economy from low to middle income status. The government says since embarking on mechanized agriculture, Uganda's exports increased from US $1.326 billion in 2015-2016 to US $1.585 billion in 2018-2019. On that background, President Museveni last year announced that the government would dole out shillings 60 billion to farmer organizations across the country so that they can start using improved methods of farming. The project is part of the Agriculture Cluster Development Project, which is being implemented in 57 districts, grouped into 11 geographical clusters with support from the World Bank, which has invested in US $150 million. Farmers that benefit are those involved in growing and trading in 5 commodities, namely maize, beans, cassava, rice, and coffee. Moving on, the Uganda shillings has continued to be stable after appreciating by 0.3% according to the latest figures by the Ministry of Finance for the month of June. Uganda's export earnings also increased by 6.7% to US $455.22 million in May 2021 from US $426.56 million in April 2021. Let's take a look.
According to the report, Bank of Uganda lowered the central bank rate to 6.5% last month from 7.0% where it had been maintained for 12 months, adding the reduction is the lowest level it has been since it was first introduced in 2011. The report also indicates that despite slowed economic activity due to the COVID-induced lockdown, the government raked in 2.1 trillion Ugandan shillings in June. According to the Finance Ministry report, of the 2.1 trillion Ugandan shillings, the biggest part was from taxes, but noted that the major taxes registered shortfalls against their respective targets due to the COVID lockdown. In the month of June, Uganda's export earnings increased by 6.7% to $455.22 million in May 2021 from $426.56 million in April 2021. This, according to the Ministry of Finance, was due to higher receipts from mainly non-coffee exports such as mineral products, electricity, tea, beans, among others, due to an increase in their respective volumes. The report also indicates that the Middle East remained Uganda's top destination for exports in May 2021, accounting to 42.7% of the total exports, whereas other destinations included East African Community with 25.6%, the rest of Africa and the European Union.
From that, the Uganda Investment Authority has given 5 acres of land to Professor Patrick Ogwang, the creator of Covidex, a drug said to treat COVID-19, to enable him set up his own factory in Soroti Industrial Park. UIA also handed a free investment license to Jena Herbals Uganda Limited, the company that produces Covidex and is owned by Professor Ogwang. We have more. The State Minister in the charge of Investment and Privatization, Evelyn Anite, during the function on Wednesday morning said that the focus of Uganda is on supporting local investors and to help them to set up and register their businesses as soon as possible. Minister Anite said government had chosen Soroti Industrial Park for Professor Ogwang's factory since the area is near some of the raw materials for the Covidex drug. The investment minister also announced a 10-year tax holiday, Professor Ogwanga's plant and machinery as part of incentives for his factory. Speaking at the function, Professor Ogwang said he was ready to hit the ground running with the new factory for his Covidex drug. The development comes on the backdrop of the fight for Covidex ownership since the drug was cleared by the National Drug Authority to help in the treatment of COVID-19. As the war raged, Professor Ogwang threatened to sue Mbarara University for using 3 of his products, including Jena DS Extra, Atemon and Covidex, to solicit funding from the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, but also evaluated the products without their consent. Ogwang said if the university does not abandon all its plans and intentions of using the products, they risk being sued for shillings 100 billion. Let's take a very quick short break. We will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, The Right to Know. Tunisia's Prime Minister Hishema Machichi on Tuesday sacked the Health Minister Fawzi Mehdi amid rocketing coronavirus cases in the North African country. The ministry said earlier this month that Tunisia's health system had collapsed under the weight of the pandemic, which has caused more than 17,000 deaths in a population of around 12 million inhabitants. We have more.
According to the 37-year-old Karima Mahdoun, who rushed like thousands of other Tunisians to get their anti-coronavirus jab at a vaccination center in Tunis, as cases spiral in the northern African country, the situation is too serious and really scares many. With limited stocks, only 913,000 people are fully vaccinated, or about 8% of Tunisia's population. Rafla Tej Delaji, a pediatrician and advisor to Tunisia's Ministry of Health, said the country needs to rapidly increase vaccinations to achieve some respite from the pandemic. She said that vaccination is a race against time and a race taking into account all the constraints, including the availability of vaccines. She added that in Tunisia, they have been administering roughly 42,000 vaccines per day up to now, a situation which requires redoubling the vaccination rate and reach 100,000 vaccinations per day.
Away from that, Black Americans have played a crucial role in shaping the nation's cuisine, and yet they have rarely been given credit for their contributions, some of which are considered among the country's most iconic dishes. The institution of slavery permanently transformed America's culinary landscape, and its ripples are still felt today. As conversations over racial injustice prompt a re-examination of the nation's cultural record, Black chefs are seizing the moment to demand the exposure they deserve in an industry where many still struggle to break out. According to historian Kelly Days, America's staple comfort food, mac and cheese, was popularized by enslaved chefs, adding that commonly found ingredients like peanuts, okra, and watermelon were brought over from Africa. Jerome Grant, a Washington-based award-winning chef working at American Bistro Jackie, said that Black chefs helped mold what American food is. Grant says he is not shocked by the double standard but wishes his fellow culinary artists of color were not continually overlooked and judged incapable of advancing in the industry. Born to a Black father and Philippine mother, Grant recalls experiencing racism in the kitchen. In one instance, he was told his skills were pretty good for a Black chef. Grant says Black chefs often feel stereotyped, constrained by an expectation that they will only be able to work within the perimeters of one particular cooking tradition. At work, he demands complete creative freedom, but tries to honor the history of Black cuisine through his creations by telling a story of the hands that built America. Moving on, Mali's transitional president Kano Assimi Goita told state television on Tuesday that he was very well hours after a man tried to stab him following Eid al-Duha prayers at the Grand Mosque in Bamako.
Two people had tried on Tuesday morning to stab the president of the transition in Mali during the Muslim rite of Eid al-Adha, the feast of sacrifice, at the Grand Mosque of Bamako. It was after prayer and while the imam was heading towards the exit of the mosque to slit the sheep that attempted stabbing took place. Goita was then taken away and did not seem to have been touched, according to reports. Present at the scene, the Minister of Religious Affairs, Mamadou Kone, told journalists that a man immediately tried to kill the president of the transition with a knife in the Great Mosque of Bamako, but was well controlled before committing this crime. Mali has been the scene of two state coups in less than a year. Both in August and May were led by the same Americanos led by Kano Assimi Goita, who has since become president of the transition. Kano Goita and the new government, appointed by the junta, have assured that they will keep their commitment to hand over the reins to civilians after elections scheduled for February 27, 2022.
A South African judge, Judge Piet Cohen, ruled on Tuesday that the former South African President Jacob Zuma's long-running corruption trial will resume on August 10th after the ex-president sought to have the case postponed because of the pandemic and recent unrest. We have more with our reporter. The former South African President Jacob Zuma on Monday appeared in court via a video link from his prison where he is serving a jail term for contempt of court on an unrelated matter. His lawyers had applied to have the case postponed by up to 3 weeks because of the unrest and the COVID pandemic to allow time for the trial to resume physically. The 79-year-old faces 16 charges of fraud, graft and racketeering related to the 1999 purchase of fighter jets, patrol boats and equipment from 5 European arms firms when he was deputy president. He is accused of taking bribes from one of the firms, French defense giant giant Thales, which has been charged with corruption and money laundering. Zuma, once dubbed the Teflon president, began serving a 15-month jail sentence for contempt on July 8th. He was arrested for disobeying a constitutional court order to testify before a panel probing the plunder of state coffers during his 9-year presidency. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, The Right to Know. In our business news today, on July 15th, the IMF Board of Directors approved a 3-year aid program for the Democratic Republic of Congo. The outcome of the negotiations confirmed on Monday by the IMF. The outcome of the negotiations confirmed on Monday by the IMF representative in Kinshasa during a joint conference with Nicolas Kazadi, the Minister of Finance. The program includes the disbursement of $1.5 billion over 3 years in exchange for certain reforms broken down into 3 parts.
The Minister of Finance, Nicolas Kazadi, said that the first axis of reform in the budgetary field is to create budgetary room for maneuver for the most important expenditure for the country, in particular social expenditure with an indicator in the program which is planned, and also for the most necessary investments which naturally involve increasing tax and domestic revenue. The second axis of reform, according to the minister, is the strengthening of the monetary framework reforms at the central bank, essentially, and supervision of the financial sector. The minister added that the third major axis of the reform is the improvement of governance and economic transparency, the fight against corruption in general and not only the mining sector. An initial disbursement of $217 million has already been made and will enable the country to strengthen its macroeconomic stability. Moreover, this cooperation with the IMF appears to be a reassuring signal to attract further external financing. Future disbursements will depend on strict adherence to the reform program agreed between the International Monetary Fund and the Democratic Republic of Congo.
In our health news today, South Africa has begun vaccinating inmates as it looked to ramp up inoculations following days of civil unrest which affected campaign. Vaccination of correctional services employees began earlier on 15th July in South Africa's overcrowded jails, with fears of the disease spreading fast within the facilities. During the unrest, many pharmacies in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng had medicines used in the treatment of coronavirus looted. Vaccination sites located in shopping malls and commercial centers were also forced to stop administering shots. The World Health Organization's Director for Africa, Mashidiso Moeti, said on Tuesday warned of a rise in infections following the riots. He added that the government has to brace itself as the World Health Organization will be preparing to see an increase in the cases again. South Africa has the highest tally of COVID-19 cases and deaths in Africa, recording more than 2.2 million infections and nearly 66,000 deaths. The authorities are struggling with the lack of vaccines, public fatigue with anti-coronavirus measures, and the rise of the highly contagious Delta variant of the virus. In our sports news today, there is a massive exodus of players from West Nile-based Uganda Premier League entity Onduparaka Football Club. 14 players were confirmed to be out of the club by the time that 2021-2022 season will kick off for different reasons. Our reporter Kachanchi has more.
Whereas some players have been let go after the expiry of their respective employment contracts, others were deemed surplus to requirement and only for the business angle. The other 12 players were let go after the technical assessment meeting held on 6 July 2021. These include goalkeeper Austin Opoka, Dennis Andamakoko, Mahdi Ajobe, Moses Okot, Oscar Agaba, Muhammad Medi Cheline, Waswa Shaban, Amis Tiago Muonge, Augustine Okoch, left back Hakim Magombe, Najib Tusabe, Guaido and Ali Muchivi. Last season, Onduparaka had ups and downs with the untimely change of the technical staff. Viali Beinomjisha, who kicked off the season, absconded from work due to unpaid salaries and sign-on fees. Later, there was a mutual agreement with his bosses to have the employment contract terminated. His former assistant Abum Baraka Wamboya took over the club for some matches before he worked under the then head coach Joseph Harold Mutiaba. Mutiaba was later sacked as the league got a stoppage because of the national lockdown created by the coronavirus pandemic.
Now, before we end our news bulletin today, let's take a recap of our top stories. Minister Tumwebaze breaks ground for construction of Agriculture Mechanization Center in Elgon region. Uganda Investment Authority gives 5 acres of land and 10-year tax holiday to Professor Ogwang for Covidex factory. Black American chefs want credit for legacy of innovation. That was the news. Thank you for always keeping it TV Africa. Please do stay tuned. More programming coming your way.
This is Africa, and that was the news.